Hello and welcome back to Game Brigade. My name is Brian, and today we're going to be diving into the full Nomad experience for Moonrakers from Ivy Studios. If you're looking for a full in-depth review for the expansion, this is the show for you. In fact, we're going to be covering the full Titan box experience, and I'll be covering the Overload and Binding Ties expansions as well. So you're going to get a full laydown of everything you need to know going into the full Moonrakers experience Kickstarter. So stay tuned for that. Let's hit it. Welcome to Nomad. I appreciate everyone watching this video. If you are new to Game Brigade, we do Kickstarter reviews and previews just like this one, where we dive into something that's going to be on Kickstarter and give you our opinion and whether or not you should be considering backing this. Moonrakers, off the bat, was one of my favorite games of 2020. It definitely was a hit for me. I loved every aspect of it. It is a deck building game which utilizes the space theme, where you're going to be getting different types of crew and different types of ship parts to modify your ship as you then try to do contracts with the other players. Now, the interesting thing about Moonrakers is that it is a competitive game. Players are going to try to go up the prestige track here individually, but you're going to need your opponents to complete some of these contracts. You're going to have to negotiate some of the rewards. That was a completely unique experience for me, having a co-op experience in a competitive versus like game. Coming with the Titan expansion, we have 3 expansions, and I've already done videos on 2 of them. We've got Overload, Nomad, and Binding Ties. With Overload and Binding Ties already having videos, so if you're interested in those, I'd recommend you watching them because they go in deep regarding those. Today's video, we're going to be talking about Nomad, which is going to be bringing in a lot of the theme of Moonrakers, as well as adding a lot of enhancements to the experience. And then I'm going to wrap up and I'm going to talk about the Titan expansion, kind of talk about my experience with the whole thing, give you what my feelings are regarding it, so that way you guys can make the best decision while backing a game. So, without further ado, let's just jump right in. What is Moonrakers? Well, Nomad is going to be bringing a big new change to the Moonrakers experience, and I've got that here in the center of the board. Let's take a deeper dive looking at it. First, you can see that we have 4, actually technically 5. You got this one up here. You got 5 different sectors plus the stay at base section here. Whenever a player takes their turn and goes to a different planet, they're going to be able to do a contract specific to the type of planet they're visiting. For example, if we go to Henko, they're going to be doing green-based missions. So these are going to be more missions reliant on shields. If we're going to be going to Comac, it's going to be reactors, etc., based on the colors. Up here we have the kind of anomaly detected one. It's Sorelia, and those are going to be based on crew. So the 5 different types of action cards that are in the game are united basically in these things. What is really cool about this, which is a big change, 2 of the easier contracts that players can do, I would argue, are Comac and Ventus. They're using both thrusters and reactors. Those are things you need for pretty much any contract, because you need to draw cards and you need to have actions. So by having these against each other, they are not able to be completed in a chain. You're going to have to figure out ways to do them in different avenues. And what I mean by that is, one of the rules for Nomad is when you travel to location, you must move on your next turn somewhere else. You cannot move against the grain unless you go to stay at base. You can only go orthogonally, so you can only go in these directions, which means you can't keep chaining the same one over and over. There are ways that you can potentially break that rule, and we will talk about that here in a second. The other exciting part about Nomad, and probably my favorite aspect, are the new event cards. Event cards are going to be directives basically sent down from the council, which we've already talked about, and they're going to be either events that are triggered instantly where all players get to participate, or they're going to be a new edict or policy that can be established by the crew. Let me see if I can find one. Of course, I didn't pre-plan this. Here's a policy. So these basically players will vote. And in the rule book, it basically says, easiest way to vote is count down 1, 2, 3, and then either thumbs up or thumbs down. If it is thumbs up, if it's passed, that will become a mandate which will stay active until it is replaced. For example, the flak mandate says you may trash 1 shield from your hand to roll 1 less hazard die. So players will have to decide if that's something that's going to be beneficial or not for them, and then vote upon it. And that will be a standing effect. And there's a ton of different types of effects that could be either positive or negative. I really enjoyed that aspect. And these are revealed on each player's start of their turn. So you're going to be going through quite a bit of them throughout the game. We've also seen a bunch more contracts added in through Nomad that are going to be just enhancing these piles. And we really got a lot more of the crew-based contracts, mostly because Sorelia, which was kind of a lesser known contracts in the previous one, because it's its own planet now, there's a lot more contracts that are added to it, as well as this new unique reward, which is located right here, which reflects to the new Sorelia prototype cards. These are going to be cards that are going to be ship parts that you'll be attaching to your crew, to your ship, but they are unique to the prototype deck. So they're not going to be part of the standard armory where you purchase your ship parts and or crew. So that's a cool new feature. Another new feature is when you go to a location, you don't know what contracts you're going to expect. In previous Moonraker games, as well as to the base game and the other 2 expansions, the contract board is visible to all players. There are 6 contracts visible, so you know what to expect and what you're going to be looking at. This one, you don't know, so it's going to be kind of more difficult in making that decision if it's going to be something you can do. So if you do go to a location, you're going to take the top 3 cards, you're going to place them at the bottom here, and you're going to review them at that point, and then you have to decide if any of these are going to be something you can complete, and you also negotiate with people around the table to see if anyone wants to join you for a trade in those rewards. If you're unable to do any of them, and if you cannot afford to swap them out, you will then have to return to the stay at base, where you're going to do it the standard stay at base system, whatever those requirements are, because they can change based on ship parts and or effects in the game. Other than that, the prestige track has also changed. We're now going to be either going to 15 points or 10 points. I really appreciate that they've given us an ability to have a longer game. And through that is basically it for the additions to Nomad. It's adding mostly this board, which does add a little bit of increased time to playability, but adds a lot more effects with the theming, the way you're going to be tackling these contracts, the events, and the new ship parts. So those are the things new to Nomad. So let's finally talk about my experience with all 3 of these expansions, as well as the full complete box, which has all the cards in it, and I'll give you guys my thoughts. So overall, Moonrakers has rated very highly for me. What I liked about these expansions is they do have a very good change in the feeling and setup that the game gives. It does give a interesting change to either way, because we played these all individually, and then for our final game, we played them all together. I wanted to get an experience of everything together and see how do I like them, what do I like or what I don't like. I'm not going to be rating these. It's going to be hard because you guys are going to know how I feel about it. But let's go from each one, starting with the one I did first, Binding Ties. Binding Ties brings the negotiation aspect to the forefront, adding in the faction bar up here, where players are going to be earning faction reward points for going on missions with other players. This is to help groups that have maybe a hard time negotiating with each other, or they want to have additional rewards, or they want to speed up the game. Binding Ties does that. Effectively, as players go on missions together, they can trade in these rewards for different types of things. You can get draw an objective card. You can draw actual add cards to your deck, or draw cards or get actions in the middle of a contract. If you are potentially failing, you need to get some additional buffs. They are basically a safety net, I would call it, for players through the game. My opinion, it's the expansion I would probably add in the least of the three. I find that I don't necessarily need the boosts and the buffs that the game gives, and if players aren't trading them in, it definitely gives a free prestige point, which is very powerful at the end for the 5 trade-ins. So I personally don't play with this as often, but as a player who can see new players joining into Moonrakers, this is a good way to get used to the feeling of negotiation and allowing players to trade their coins or their victory points with each other so that they can go on missions. So that was Binding Ties, and I covered that one in full. Next one is Overload, and this one I said was my favorite of the two originally, and I will say that Overload is probably the best, most consistent expansion that I could think of, because it just adds more of everything and just enhances the game at such a good level. What do I mean by that? Well, not only is it adding more crew, more contracts, more ship parts, but it adds in something unique that we haven't seen in a lot of different types of deck builders, and that are more of the action cards. We have these standard action cards, which are, you know, the reactors, the draw cards, the thrusters, but what they added on these ones are these special cards, where they're hybrids of basically 2 cards put together, such as a damage and a reactor. Or let's see who this one is. This one is a boosted thruster. So instead of drawing 2 cards, it draws 3 cards. It changed a lot of my interpretation of the game, and really also changes your evaluation of what cards are more powerful. Where are you going to spend your money? Do you spend your money on buying some of these cards, or do you spend your money on buying ship parts, which normally you buy crew and ship parts? It's the way to enhance your deck. But now you have these enhanced cards that could technically really go with your deck, depending on the kind of theme or the strategy that you're implementing at that time. From there, we had Nomad. Nomad is probably going to be another one of the ones that I would say is a must play for me, because I really do enjoy the space theme that we have here in the center, the ability to fly to different sections, doing contracts based on that theme of that mission, as well as who you can bring along for negotiation. This is the most interesting part. Only players that are adjacent to where you're located can join you. Previously in Moonrakers, any of the other players could go on your contract. But this one, if a player is too far away, such as this green player is too far away from these guys, because they can only go adjacent sectors, they are not able to help you on your contract. So that really does change the negotiation aspect. I really, really enjoyed that aspect. The other thing about Nomad that I think is more slept on is the ship parts really did add a lot more strategy level and depth to the game, being able to come up with interesting new strategies, interesting ways to build your ship, different ways that you can take it. Players who never go shields found ways where they can abuse the shields by having free actions based on how many hazard dice they're blocking. So that means they're wanting to take on all the hazard dice. It was a really interesting way seeing people build their ships in completely new ways. I really, really enjoyed it. So with the 3, I think they're all great. Now, would I play all 3 at one time? That's the question. And my answer would probably be no. Obviously, you kind of understand my feelings on Binding Ties, but it also adds a layer and more cards that I don't necessarily feel like I need in my collection. Not in my collection, but in my gameplay. There will be times where I won't mind playing with Binding Ties. But for the most part, I'm always going to be playing in Overload, and I'm always going to be playing with Nomad. I should also note that my collection does have the Kickstarter Shard. I think it's the Shard. It's like mini expansions, but they're very small. They're like maybe 5 or 10 cards each. There's 2 mini expansions, so I do have that in here as well. But those cards don't really affect this opinion or this review. Overall, what is my other thoughts on it? Right now, based on the prototype version of the Titan box that I have, I will say setup and teardown can be a bit of a beast, especially when you're playing with Nomad. The reason I say that is Nomad requires you to have all of your contracts broken down by color. You must have all the oranges, blues, greens, yellows, and purples separated. The other thing is the box wants you to have everything put back by expansion. So not only am I going to have to take all of my contracts at the start of the game and break them up into their color coordinations, at the end of the game, I have to check the expansion symbol on every card in the game and make sure they're separated apart so that they can fit in. So that was one thing that was definitely a downer for me, was the amount of time it took for me to put the game back. It almost felt like it took like an hour, even though that might be an exaggeration. It definitely was a long time comparatively to a lot of other games. Now, so I don't know how they're going to change, and I can kind of show you guys here with the top down how the organization system looks right now. We have over here, we have objectives in their base game, ship parts, and it goes by expansion. So you could have Binding Ties, Overload, and then Nomad would be down here. Here we have contracts, so you'd have base game contracts and crew members. So everything is broken down in these sections by expansion. They also have a lot more sections that are being unused. I don't know if that means there's more expansions on the way. It could be. They definitely have planned forethought ahead with this box, so that's kind of cool. But I just want to say that right now there is a lot of breakdown. A cool feature that I really did like, though, is that this comes out and this has all of your action cards in it, so you can have everything kind of setting aside, and it does help with cleaning up table space, because once you got those extra action cards from Overload, it definitely gets a little crazy in terms of table presence. So that is it. This is everything. I've had multiple videos. I've had a review on Moonrakers. I've had a review on Nomad. I've had a review on Binding Tides and a review on Overload. I hope you guys appreciate all the type of content we put out for this game. I do, in my heart, love Moonrakers. I think it's an incredibly fun game. I enjoy the negotiation aspect. It's completely unique in my collection, and I have fun playing. It's probably one of my most played deck builders to this day. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And also, leave a comment and subscribe, all the YouTube things to help generate more algorithm. You know what I'm saying. I appreciate it all. Anyways, this is Brian from Game Brigade. I will talk to you very soon. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.